On a crisp morning in Kamloops, British Columbia, on November 8, 2024, Wei Chen restocked shelves in his small grocery store, Chens Market, the faint hum of a refrigerator blending with the chime of the door. At 50, Wei, a Chinese-Canadian, was a wiry man with close-cropped hair and a steady gaze that masked the weariness of long days. Kamloops, a city of 90,000 nestled in the Thompson Valley, was a rugged mix of riverfront parks, strip malls, and ranch land. Wei had moved here 9 years ago with his wife Leon, a part-time bookkeeper, and their daughter Amy, 16, seeking a quieter life after Vancouver's grind. But quiet came with a cost. One Wei paid as an Asian man in a mostly white town. Chens Market, a modest shop on Victoria Street, was his lifeline, stocked with fresh produce, Asian staples, and local goods. It drew a steady stream, students, retirees, truckers, but prejudice lingered like dust on the shelves. Customers like Doug Harper, a white mechanic, often haggled prices, muttering, "You sure this isn't marked up?" despite clear tags. Suppliers like Greg Larson at Valley Wholesale delayed deliveries, citing logistics that didn't hit other stores. Last week, a customer, a white woman in her 50s, had refused to buy, saying, "I don't trust your stuff." Wei let it slide, needing the sales, but each slight was a stone piling up. Today, as Wei arranged apples, Doug walked in, his boots heavy. "Wei, these carrots look off," he said, holding a bag, his tone sharp. "You check your stock, right?" Wei's jaw tightened. He'd inspected every crate that morning. "They're fresh, Doug. I'll swap them, no charge." Doug's smirk said he doubted it. "Better be. I don't like dodgy deals." The word dodgy stung, a code Wei knew. Chinese, immigrant, not trustworthy. He replaced the bag, but Doug paid exact change, muttering, "Hope it's good this time." At lunch, Wei ate dumplings Leon had packed, alone in the back room. His friend Malik, a black Canadian barber across the street, texted, "Doug hassling you again?" Wei replied, "Same old. You?" Malik's response was grim. "Customer called me urban yesterday, smiled it off." Wei sighed, their shared weight heavy. Leon faced it too, clients at her bookkeeping gig questioning her accent, some switching to white firms. Amy at school had mentioned a classmate, Ethan, whispering chinks in the hall. Wei taught her to stay strong, but the stones were spreading. That afternoon, Wei found a note taped to the store's back door. "Go back to China." The words, scrawled in red marker, hit like a fist. He tore it down, his hands trembling, and hid it in his pocket before Amy arrived to help with inventory. Leon, dropping her off, saw his face. "Wei, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice low. He showed her the note, his voice tight. "It's not the first." Last week, his cash register had been scratched with virus, a cruel nod to old COVID fears. He'd reported it to the police, but Constable Paul Reed called it random and offered no follow-up. Leon's eyes welled. "We can't ignore this, Wei." He nodded, his chest heavy. "We won't. But quiet, no cops yet." At home, a rented house on Columbia Street, Wei stir-fried vegetables while Amy studied. Leon, balancing her laptop, spoke softly. "We need cameras, Wei, like Malik's shop." Wei agreed, but dread crept in. Cameras cost money, and the store's profits were slim, stretched by rent, Amy's school fees, Leon's software subscriptions. Their neighbor, Mrs. Susan Fowler, a white retiree, had already complained about their weird cooking smells, suggesting they adapt to the street. Wei brushed it off, but Susan's chats with Doug, seen at the gas station, raised his guard. On November 9th, the harassment deepened. Wei arrived at the store to find a delivery crate smashed, apples bruised, chink scratched into the wood. He photographed it, his heart racing, but didn't call Reed. Trust in the police was gone. Amy, helping after school, saw the damage and gasped. "Dad, who did this?" Wei's voice was calm for her. "Troublemakers, Amy, we'll fix it." But his hands shook as he salvaged what he could, costing $200. At school, Amy admitted Ethan had tripped her, muttering slants. Leanne, home late, found a new note under their doormat. "You don't belong." "Wei, this is a pattern," she said, her voice breaking. "Doug, Susan, Ethan's dad, they're connected." That night, Wei and Leon sat in their kitchen, the notes and photos on the table. "It's not random," Wei said, his voice low. "Doug's pushing, Susan's watching, Ethan's dad's in it." Leon's eyes hardened. "We get cameras tomorrow. We catch them. We act quietly." Wei nodded, his resolve firm but fear lingering. They were Chinese Canadians, their store a beacon, but Kamloops' shadows were deep and their fight was just beginning. On November 10th, 2024, Wei Chen stood in the narrow storeroom of Chens Market, his small grocery store in Kamloops, British Columbia, watching his wife, Leon, adjust a security camera above the back door. The device, a $400 dent in their strained budget, flashed its red light, a silent protector against the racism creeping into their lives. At 50, Wei, a Chinese Canadian, felt the weight of the past week, a note taped to the store demanding go back to China, a smashed delivery crate with chinks scratched into it, and a cash register defaced with virus. Kamloops' crisp autumn air carried a venom that threatened his business, his family, and their place in this city of 90,000. Leanne, 48, tested the camera's feed on her phone, the grainy image showing the alley behind the store. "It's live," she said, her bookkeeper's hand steady despite the fear in her eyes. "One at the front, one at home. We catch them, Wei." He nodded, his throat tight. Them meant Doug Harper, the white mechanic who haggled with veiled distrust, Greg Larson, the supplier choking their stock, or their neighbor Susan Fowler, whose adept complaints about their cooking masked prejudice. The notes, the crate, Amy's school taunts, they weren't random, Wei knew, but proving it risked Chens Market, their lifeline for Leon, their daughter Amy, 16, and their home on Columbia Street. The store was quieter now, the vandalism's echo lingering. Regulars shopped, but some, like Mrs. Thompson, hadn't returned, her local sourcing excuse a coded slight. At noon, Amy arrived from school, restocking shelves. "Dad, mister." "Reynolds canceled his order," she said, arranging cans. "Said he's going Canadian." Wei's stomach sank. Reynolds was a steady bulk buyer, his Canadian a jab at their Chinese roots. "We'll get by, Amy," Wei said, his voice firm, but his hands shook as he sorted produce. Amy's eyes flashed. "It's Ethan's dad, isn't it? He's with Doug." Wei nodded, the pattern clear. Doug, Greg, Susan, Ethan at Amy's school, a web to strangle the store. That afternoon, Greg called, his tone smug. "Delivery's delayed, Wei. Payment glitch." "You know the drill." Wei's grip on the phone tightened. He'd paid $500 up front. "Greg, I settled yesterday," he said, his voice even. Greg chuckled. "Another mix-up. $600 or wait." It was a shakedown, and Wei paid, their savings shrinking, his anger a low hum. Amy, pricing fruit, whispered, "He's working with Doug, Dad." Wei's silence was a shield, but Amy's defiance mirrored his own. At home, Leanne shared her struggle. "A client dropped my bookkeeping," she said, her voice low. "Said my name's too hard to trust." Wei's chest ached. The pattern was stark. Doug, Greg, Susan, Ethan's taunts at Amy's school, a net to push them out. Amy admitted Ethan had tripped her in the hall. His slant slur hissed low. "Teachers didn't care," she said, her eyes down. Wei hugged her, his voice fierce. "You're our strength, Amy. Always." But the stones were piling. Leon's clients, Amy's school, the store, all battlegrounds. On November 11th, the camera caught a clue. Wei, checking the feed during a break, saw footage from 2 a.m. A figure, Doug, his mechanic's build distinct, spray painting virus on the store's back wall, glancing at Susan's house, her porch light on. Wei's pulse raced. He sent the clip to Leon, texting, "It's Doug, Susan's in it." Leon replied, "Don't confront yet, we need more." But Wei's patience was fraying. He pictured Doug's dodgy jabs, Susan's adapt, Greg's delays. They were a noose tightening around Chens Market. At the store, a customer, Miss Patel, an Indian-Canadian nurse, lingered after buying rice. "Wei, I saw the crate," she said, her voice low. "My clinic got tagged last year. Same red paint. Keep proof." Wei nodded, gratitude mixing with dread. "Thanks, Miss Patel." But sales were down, Doug's whispers turning locals away. At school, Ethan's taunts grew bolder, his shove bruising Amy's arm. Leon's bookkeeping lost another client, citing communication issues. A new note appeared in the store's mailbox. "Last chance." Wei's hands shook as he bagged it, Amy's eyes wide. That evening, Wei and Leon sat in their kitchen, the footage and notes spread out. "It's not just Doug," Leon said, her voice low. "Susan's covering, Greg's helping. We need to act." Wei's jaw clenched. "We talked to Susan first. She's weaker than Doug." Leon nodded, her eyes fierce. "Quietly, we protect Amy, the store." Wei agreed, but dread lingered. Susan's husband, Frank, was a retired trucker tied to Constable Paul Reed. They were Chinese Canadians, their roots deep, but Kamloops' thorns were sharp, and their fight was only heating up. On November 12th, 2024, Wei Chen stood on the porch of his neighbor's house on Columbia Street, Kamloops, British Columbia, his breath visible in the frosty dusk, as he gripped a printed still from the store's security camera. The image, captured at 2 a.m. 2 days ago, showed Doug Harper, the white mechanic, spray painting "Virus" on Chens Market's back wall, glancing at Susan Fowler's lit porch. At 50, Wei, a Chinese Canadian, was a shield against relentless racism. Notes demanding go back to China and last chance, a smashed crate with chinks scratched into it, and supplier Greg Larson's deliberate delays. Chens Market, his family's lifeline, was faltering, sales down 30%, clients spooked by vandalism, and Kamloops chill hit a venom threatening his wife, Leon, and daughter, Amy, 16. Leon stood beside him, her bookkeeper's eyes fierce despite the strain. "We keep it calm," she said, her voice low. "Susan talks, we get Doug." Susan, their white neighbor whose adapt complaints about their cooking veiled prejudice, was their target. Her porch light during the vandalism tied her to Doug and her husband Frank, a retired trucker, linked to Constable Paul Reed, who dismissed earlier notes as random. Wei nodded, his anger a steady pulse. The notes, the crate, Amy's school taunts, they couldn't wait. They knocked, Susan's face appearing, her smile crumbling. "Wei, Leon, what's this?" she asked, her voice shaky. Wei held up the still. "This is Doug, Susan, defacing my store. Your light was on, you saw." Susan's eyes flicked to the image, her hands twisting her cardigan. "I didn't see anything," she stammered, but Frank emerged, his bulk looming. "You accusing us?" he growled. Leon's voice was sharp. "We're asking, Frank. Doug's paint, your porch, the notes, stop it, or we take this further." Frank's face reddened, but Susan's hand gripped his arm. "We don't want trouble," she whispered, her voice breaking. Wei's gaze was unyielding. "Tell Doug to back off." "You know why?" They left, Frank's glare a warning, but no note came that night. A tense hush. At Chens Market, the air was heavy. On November 13th, Wei served fewer customers, the vandalism's echo lingering. Amy, restocking shelves, whispered, "Dad, Mrs. Carter stopped coming, said she's buying local." Wei's gut twisted. Carter was a regular. Her local, a coded rejection. "We'll manage, Amy," he said, his voice steady but his hands shook as he sorted vegetables. Amy's eyes burned. "It's Ethan's dad, isn't it?" "He's with Doug." Wei nodded, the web clear. Doug's mechanic clout, Greg's delays, Susan's silence. Ethan at Amy's school, strangling their lives. That afternoon, Greg called, his tone smug. "Shipments delayed again, Wei. Cash issue." "Pay up." Wei's grip tightened. He'd paid $600 yesterday. "Greg, I settled," he said, his voice firm. Greg laughed. "Glitch, buddy, $500 or wait." It was sabotage, and Wei paid. Their savings nearly gone, his anger a low roar. At school, Amy's locker was defaced, slant in marker. Leon's bookkeeping lost another client, citing cultural fit. A new note appeared under the store's shutter. "You're done." Wei's hands shook as he bagged it, Amy's eyes wide. On November 14th, the home camera struck gold. At 3 a.m., two figures, Doug and Frank, Susan's husband, spray-painted "Leave" on their garage, a note left. Final warning. Wei's heart raced as he showed Leon, Amy asleep. "It's them," he whispered, his voice trembling. Leon's eyes blazed. "We hit Doug next, then Greg. No police. They'll bury it." Wei hesitated, fear spiking. Doug's ties to Reed could kill the store, but Leon's grip was fierce. "We're not running." "For Amy." Wei nodded, his resolve hardening. "Tomorrow, we end it." That day, Wei arrived at the store to find a freezer unplugged, produce spoiled, costing $800. Amy, helping, cried, "Dad, it's too much!" Wei's heart broke, but he checked the camera. 2 a.m., Doug's face clear. At school, Amy's books were lost, Ethan's smirk proof. Leon's bookkeeping faced a tax review tied to Frank's network. Malik, the black barber, texted, "They hit my shop too, Wei. Evidence is power." Wei's folder, notes, footage, photos grew, but using it meant risking everything. That evening, Wei and Leon marched to Doug's house, a brick bungalow on Tranquille Road. Doug answered, his mechanic's frame filling the doorway, his smirk fading at the store footage. "What's this?" he growled. Wei's voice was lethal. "You, Doug, trashing my store. Frank, too, painting our house. We have notes, footage, everything. Stop or we take it further." Leon's phone showed the clip, Doug's face frozen. "We know about Greg, Susan, the taunts. It ends now." Doug's eyes flared, but his voice was low. "You're dead, Chen." Wei stood tall. "We're Canadians. This is our home." Try us. They left. Doug's silence a crack, but Wei's hands shook. The cost was crushing. On November 15th, the store stood untouched. No notes. A fleeting calm. But Greg delayed parts again, forcing Wei to pay $300. At school, Ethan's taunts quieted, his dad absent. Amy's teacher returned her homework, unmarked, a small shift. Leon's bookkeeping gained a client, Malik's words spreading. Wei's heart lifted, but the store's till was low, their savings gone. He and Leon sat late, the footage and notes between them. "We have enough," Wei said, his voice steady. "If they push, we go to the police." Leon took his hand, her eyes fierce. "We're Chens. They don't win." Wei's fear lingered, but his strength burned brighter. Chens Market was theirs, and Kamloops would learn it, one quiet stand at a time. On November 16th, 2024, Wei Chen stood behind the counter of Chens Market, his small grocery store in Kamloops, British Columbia, his hands steady as he scanned a customer's apples, his eyes flicking to the security camera's blinking light. The footage from 3 nights ago, Doug Harper and Frank Fowler, Susan's retired trucker husband, spray painting "Leave" on their garage, leaving a note with final warning, was a shield in his pocket, shared only with his wife Leon. At 50, Wei, a Chinese Canadian, was a bulwark against relentless racism. Notes demanding "Go back to China and you're done," a smashed crate with chinks scratched into it, a defaced register, and supplier Greg Larson's sabotage. Chens Market, their family's anchor, was teetering, sales down 40%, clients scared by vandalism, and Kamloops' frosty streets hid a venom threatening Leon, 48, and their daughter Amy, 16. The confrontations with Susan and Doug had bought a shaky truce, no new notes, no paint, but Wei felt the town's pulse, tense and vengeful. Leon, her bookkeeping shifts grueling, stood firm. "We've got them," she'd said, clutching their evidence folder. Doug's virus graffiti, Frank's vandalism, photos of notes, a client's slants slur against Amy. Amy's school taunts and Leon's client losses echoed their fight. Wei's voice was iron. "We end this, Leon, for Amy." But Doug's mechanic clout, Frank's ties to Constable Paul Reed, and Susan's complicity were a fortress, risking their home on Columbia Street, the store, their life. At Chens Market, the air was heavy. On November 17th, Wei served a trickle of customers, the vandalism's echo lingering. Amy, restocking cans, whispered, "Dad, Mr. Jenkins stopped buying. Said he's going local." Wei's gut twisted. Jenkins was a regular. His local, a coded jab. "We'll survive, Amy," he said, his voice steady, but his hands shook as he sorted fruit. Amy's eyes burned. "It's Ethan's dad, isn't it? He's with Doug." Wei nodded, the web stark. Doug, Greg, Susan, Ethan at Amy's school, choking their lives. That afternoon, Greg called, his tone smug. "Delivery stuck, Wei. Payment issue. $700. Wei's grip tightened. He'd paid $500 yesterday. "Greg, I settled," he said, his voice firm. Greg laughed. "Another glitch. Pay or no stock." It was a shakedown, and Wei paid, their savings nearly gone, his anger a low roar. At school, Amy's locker was defaced again, chinks out in marker. Leon's bookkeeping faced a fraud audit tied to Frank's network. A new note appeared in the store's till, "Leave or burn." Wei's hand shook as he bagged it, Amy's eyes wide. On November 18th, the store camera caught a blow. At 1 a.m., 3 figures, Doug, Frank, and a third, likely Ethan's dad, trashed the produce section, smashing crates, writing filth on a wall. A note was left. "You're finished." Wei's heart pounded as he showed Leon Amy asleep. "It's war," he whispered, his voice trembling. Leon's eyes blazed. "We hit Susan again, then Doug. No police. They'll bury it." Wei hesitated, fear surging. Doug's ties could ruin them, but Leon's grip was fierce. "We're not running. For Amy." Wei nodded, his resolve steel. "Tonight, we end it." That day, Wei arrived to find the store's cooler sabotaged, dairy spoiled, costing $1,000. Amy, helping, cried, "Dad, we're done." Wei's heart broke, but he checked the camera. Midnight, Doug's face clear. At school, Amy's books were destroyed. Ethan's smirk-proof. Leon's bookkeeping lost a client, citing trust issues. Miss Patel, the Indian-Canadian nurse, texted, "They hit my clinic too, Wei. Proofs your strength." Wei's folder, notes, footage, photos was a weapon, but using it meant risking everything. That evening, Wei and Leon returned to Susan's house, the store footage on Wei's phone, Susan answered, her face pale, Frank behind. "What now?" she stammered. Wei's voice was unyielding. "Doug and Frank, trashing my store. You knew, Susan. Stop, or we take it further." Leon's phone showed the clip, Doug's face frozen. "We have notes, footage, everything. Your silence ends." Frank's fists clenched, but Susan's voice broke. "I'll stop them. Frank dug all of it." "Please, no trouble." Frank growled. "You'll pay." But Susan's sob held him back. They left, Susan's plea a spark, but Wei's hands shook. The cost was steep. On November 19th, the store stood untouched. No notes, a faint dawn. Greg resumed deliveries, his tone curt but compliant. A customer, Miss Patel, returned, buying extra. "You're a fighter, Wei," she said. At school, Ethan's taunts stopped, his dad absent. Amy's teacher praised her essay, a Chinese-Canadian story. Leon's bookkeeping gained 3 clients. Malik's word spreading. A note appeared in their mailbox. "Sorry." It was shaky, unsigned, maybe Susan's, maybe Doug's guilt. The store's till rose. Wei's shelves full, the evidence folder a silent guard. That night, Wei stood in Chens Market, the hum of the refrigerator soft, Leon and Amy beside him. Amy's drawing, a family in a store, a star above, rested on the counter. The notes, the scrawls, the slurs, they'd scarred him, but so had Leon's resolve, Amy's courage, Patel's nod, Malik's texts. They'd fought in the dark, no crowds, no noise, and claimed their place. Wei touched the counter, its wood warm, and whispered, "This is our fight, our light. Share it, carry it, let it shine through every aisle." He saw others, shopkeepers, families, kids like Amy, holding their story, passing it like a torch to light every corner, a flame no hate could dim.